and welcome to this episode of Live with Lizzie Lee. Edge is a comprehensive database of Chinese companies for investors and due diligence researchers. I'm your host, Lizzie, an MIT-trained economist turned journalist here at Wall Street TV who covers China and its relation to the world. Joining me today is Mr. Ziyi Yang, reporter at MIT Technology Review. Ziyi has been covering China's chip-making industry, including the recent corruption scandals, which has led to the arrests of several top semiconductor fund executives. Thank you so much, Ziyi, for being here with me.
Hi, Lizzie. Thank you for having me.
So, Ziyi, can we first talk through the recent corruption scandals associated with the Chinese state-owned semiconductor fund? What happened and who was implicated in the scandals?
Sure. So what happened recently was that there really were several individuals associated to the big fund in different ways that have been going under corruption investigations. And one of them is Ding Wenwu, who was the chief executive of the fund, which is the full name is called China Integrated Circuit Industry Investment Fund, but people usually just call it the Big Fund. So he was a MIT official before, and he became the chief executive, and he is now under investigation. But then also there are at least five managers from there are at least five managers from another institution called Huaxin, who's very closely related to the Big Fund, who are also under there. And besides that, there's also a company called Tsinghua Uni Group, who has been invested by the Big Fund, and three of their high up managers have also been investigated. So that really connects to a web to make people question what is going on with the Big Fund right now.
Right, so shockwaves across the industry. You refer to the fund as the Big Fund. Can you tell us a little more about the Big Fund? Why was it established and has it been successful so far?
Sure. So it was established in September 2014. At the time, it was this idea that the government is going to pour a lot of money into the semiconductor industry to develop these industries that China is really not good at the time. So at the time, at 2014, I think it raised $20 billion, and it all invested that into different subsectors of semiconductors. In 2019, it raised another $30 billion, and it has already invested $10 billion of that into the semiconductor industry again. So really, it's just the sheer amount of money that's being poured into semiconductors. That's why it's named the Big Fund.
I see. And do we know how many or what percentage of the projects supported by Big Fund have been successful versus failed?
Well, it's really hard to say because a lot of these companies are still growing, they're still developing. And the work they usually done, like the research work, will take decades for people to see any kind of result. So that is one of the tricky things about investing in semiconductor and also about venture capital coming into semiconductors, because it takes a really long time before them can see any result. And that is partly why a government fund is justified, because the government is the only one who can be patient enough to wait 20 years without seeing any financial return. That's kind of the idea of the Big Fund. So far we have seen the phase one of Big Fund exit a few companies and have some financial returns. But overall, it's really hard to say which of these are successful and which of these are not. We can see, however, there are only several very clear examples of success and failure. On the success side, we will probably say the Yangtze Memory Company, which we would call YMTC. They produce a very specific type of chip that's called flash memory chips. And in a few years, they have developed to the point they're kind of leading the international industry right now. So that's one of the success. But then on the failure side, we have Tsinghua Uni Group, which really has been one of the oldest running semiconductor companies in China, but it went bankrupt last year. So how it failed so spectacularly was one of the reasons people were questioning maybe the Big Fund was wrong to have invested in Tsinghua Uni Group.
I see. So you spoke with many experts on this topic. What do they think of the future of the Big Fund? Do they think the state-backed model is likely to deliver scientific breakthrough or commercial success?
Well, for one thing, the corruption charges we're seeing right now, that can be a good thing, because that is a clear message that something is going wrong in the industry and with regard to the Big Fund. And the officials, even maybe the top leaders, they are also realizing that we need to investigate what's going on. We need to know what to do in the future. But the experts, they don't really see China change its overall approach of pouring government money, throwing government support behind these semiconductors, because these companies and these semiconductor industries, they're still the strategic, they still are of strategic importance to China for a really long time because China hasn't made too much progress in terms of catching up with the technological progress when it compares to like the United States or other Western countries. So we are going to see that happen more, like more government support behind semiconductors, but then we might see them a little bit more targeted. Like one of the idea that Paul Triolo told me when I was talking to him was that like maybe it's time to introduce some people who are better at commercial investment, who are better at finding the companies who are a good investment target. These kind of people may be what the big fund need to actually use its money efficiently. So people are hoping that maybe these corruption changes can lead to a change like that, but we don't really know whether that's going to happen.
Right, and as you briefly alluded to, semiconductor now is really the next frontier in a tech race between the United States and China. And as you well know, Eric Schmidt, the former Google executive, famously commented, the Congress is working at political speed, while the Chinese government is working at commercial speed, making that contrast between the United States and China. I wonder if you think that, that speed comparison is an accurate assessment. What do you think are the relative advantages and disadvantages of the United States versus China?
I think that's a very interesting statement because if you're saying China is moving at a commercial speed, you're kind of ignoring that that's partly also because the government has been throwing a lot of policy support around that. So I wouldn't really say that's like a pure commercial success. There's really a mixed result of commerce and political factors in there. One thing I feel a lot of people have been saying recently is that we need to be cautious about how much China has really achieved. Right. We are seeing something like the SMIC has maybe achieved how to manufacture 7nm chips, but there's like a very vague news report that we didn't really know how much of that is true. Like whether SMIC can really produce them at scale, whether that's something we can see them do very often in the future, we don't really know that. So I think we need to take this like China's cheap success story with a grain of salt to know that like, yes, the government support, the government money has helped a lot, but maybe still not enough in terms of like enabling China to catch up with the United States in semiconductor research. So I do feel like right now we can see that there's some success or there's some advantages of the Chinese model of like political support because we can see that going back to the example of the Yangtze Memory semiconductor company, they are an example that if you really throw the money into the right place, you can develop a leading company in a few years. But then there are also other failure examples to show that like it's very easy to not do that, to not put your money in the right place. And in that sense, the US model of like letting the market speak, letting the market choose who's going to be the success, who's going to be the failure, that might be a more efficient way to doing that. So right now we're kind of seeing these two models like wrangling with each other. However, we are also seeing changes on the US side, like the CHIPS Act. So with that, it really resembles a lot of the things that China is doing, like with throwing government support behind American domestic semiconductor companies to boost domestic industry. So we really are seeing kind of like the mix of that. So maybe China will move a little bit to the commercial method, and maybe US will move a little bit to the political method. But really the common goal is the same. It's just like to really advance faster in this race of semiconductor.
If you enjoy our discussions here, I'm sure you would find value in our new powerful marketplace tool for investors, also called China Edge. It tracks, distills, and analyzes both Chinese language and English language materials about Chinese companies, business leaders, and government entities, and reviews the often hidden links between them. For our YouTube viewers, we are offering a limited time 50% discount. Just go to the link you see on the screen and use the code EDGE50. Also, sign up for the China Edge newsletter. It's a daily 2-minute rundown of China business news you don't want to miss. The link is right here on the screen. You can also click on the link in the video's description section to get your complimentary subscription today.